It is interesting once you get used to something like the dark-eyed Junco in the Appalachians. You come to think of that as a Junco, and of course there are other types of Juncos, other Juncos that have other characteristics in different parts of the world. And so when I first saw that Junco that was in the highlands of Guatemala, I guess I was pretty excited.
These things.
Oh my God, that eye is so yellow.
It's like satanic. I mean, I don't know if I'm comfortable with that.
Look at the belly too.
It's huge.
It's like there's no...
That yellow eye just was unbelievable. To go from studying a dark-eyed Junco to seeing one that had an eye that looked like it was on fire that was a kind of a shock.
Oh man, look at that.
What the f?
Suddenly I had this Junco in the hand that was a Junco, but just its eye looked like it was piercing my own. It was pretty striking to me.
Yellow-eyed Juncos have historically been classified as a single species that inhabits high elevation forests of Mexico and Central America, as well as small portions of the southwestern U.S. But a closer look within the yellow-eyed Juncos reveals at least 3 groups that have distinct geographic ranges and subtle but clear differences in feather coloration and physical traits. The mountaintops inhabited by the Juncos in Baja and Guatemala are small and isolated ranges, and yellow-eyed Juncos don't migrate, leading researchers to hypothesize that these groups might be heading off on their own evolutionary trajectories, perhaps even representing different species. Up until now, there was little information available to evaluate just how differentiated these groups might be. Recently, members of the Ketterson Lab at Indiana University joined Dr. Borja Mila from Spain's National Science Museum on a field expedition to study yellow-eyed Juncos across their range. The first destination was the highlands of Guatemala, where intact forests are few and far between. Centuries of farming and constant demand for firewood have nearly stripped the mountains bare. One exception is a forest reserve near the indigenous community of Todos Santos Chichin in the Cuchumatanes Mountains, where local residents retain the language, dress, and customs of their Mayan ancestors. Permission to enter the reserve is closely guarded by the village elders, which helps ensure that the area will remain a safe haven for the diversity of flora and fauna found in this unique habitat. The reserve covers more than 15,000 acres, and it includes the area's highest mountains at over 12,000 feet above sea level.
This area of the highland of Guatemala is under a very serious threat of deforestation. The communities, the indigenous communities that live here have very few resources. But the indigenous community has decided to preserve this large area of forest to keep the water flowing into their communities and have wood resources. It's a very small area and it's under very strong threat, together with other endemics found here, like the Goldman's warbler. There's also very isolated populations of the broad-tailed hummingbird. There's a very differentiated pine siskin here. So a very important area with potentially very differentiated set of taxa, and that increases the conservation value of this area very much. So we have here a Guatemala Junco. Right now it's considered to be a race of the yellow-eyed Junco, but there's several phenotypic differences between this bird and the other yellow-eyed Juncos in Chiapas and in the rest of Mexico and in Baja California. It's a much more olive gray, duskier gray on the head. The back has this olive wash on the brown, so it's not as reddish. And it has much less white on the tail feathers compared to northern Juncos like the dark-eyed and other races. And what we do is we come here, we set up nets, and then we use recordings, playbacks of the male song to attract the birds to the nets. So we capture them, and then once we have it in the hand, we're able to take all kinds of measurements, morphological measurements of wing, the bill, the tail, the tarsus. We take a blood sample for the genetic analysis, and then we put an aluminum band that's uniquely numbered, and then we release them.
With just 3 days to spend in Guatemala, time was of the essence. Luckily, the birds and the weather both cooperated, allowing the team to collect the data they needed before moving on. The city of San Cristobal in Chiapas, Mexico, lies just 100 miles northwest of the reserve in Guatemala. But to get there, the team had to drive down through the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, a hot, moist, lowland tropical valley that separates the mountaintop ranges of the Guatemalan and Mexican Juncos. San Cristobal is a city where the old meets the new. As one of Mexico's best preserved Spanish colonial towns, picturesque historical architecture and open-air markets fuel a vibrant tourist economy. But just outside the old city, the modern challenges of urban sprawl, pollution, deforestation, and mining threaten the abundance of the region's valuable natural resources. Fortunately, there is a growing movement to promote sustainable forestry and protect biodiversity. And among the beneficiaries of such efforts is the yellow-eyed junco. In the mountains just outside San Cristobal, Noé Beltran, a local forester, has established a private ecological park. The goal of the park is to promote the coexistence of nature and sustainable resource extraction. For every tree that is cut, 10 are planted.
La reserva tiene 146 hectáreas, es decir, es un predio grande para estas áreas. La tierra alrededor de San Cristóbal de las Casas ya resulta muy reducida porque ha crecido la población, claro. Y entonces hay una gran presión poblacional para hacer estas áreas habitacionales, ¿no? O sea, las montañas. Y las montañas entonces pues desaparece todo el bosque.
This intact piece of highland forest provided a perfect site to collect samples and song recordings from the Mexican yellow-eyed junco in Chiapas. Birds use their songs to attract mates and announce territorial ownership to rivals. If songs from different populations are quite distinct, then the birds may be unlikely to recognize one another as the same species. The Mexican yellow-eyed junco's geographic range is quite large, so it was important to collect data from an additional race within this group. It was a 2-day drive to Mexico City, where the team met up with a local ornithologist, Adan Oliveras. Adan took the team to a volcanic mountain called El Ajusco, just outside the city. He explained that this important conservation area used to be pristine and peaceful, but recent years have seen an increase in recreation and pollution from Mexico City's growing population. The forests of oak, pine, and fir on these high volcanoes provide habitat for varieties of birds, small mammals, and reptiles unique to this area. Endemic populations are those plants and animals found nowhere else in the world. They typically develop where geographic isolation allows them to diverge without gene flow from neighboring populations. Endemism is common on island chains such as Hawaii and the Galapagos, but it also occurs in high-elevation forests, like those found on El Ajusco, in Chiapas, and in Guatemala, where unique types of yellow-eyed juncos are found. Scientists don't always agree on whether or not local endemic groups should be called separate species. One of the most widely accepted definitions, known as the biological species concept, defines species based on whether or not they are able to interbreed. But for populations found in geographically isolated locations, it is impossible to know whether they would interbreed in nature if given the chance. In these situations, biologists must define species based on how genetically and physically distinct they are from one another. Whether or not a local population is classified as a unique species can be a critical distinction. It can even make the difference between receiving protection and habitat conservation versus being overlooked and facing extinction.
Juncos are interesting because they tend to inhabit these high elevation patches of forest. So you might consider these sky islands. That's one of the names that they give for these patches that are separated from one another by what you might consider oceans of desert. One of the ideas is that in these patches of forest is where they've diversified. So they've become isolated from other populations, and in this sort of splendid isolation, you might call it, they have diverged from their brothers and sisters and have kind of gone off in different evolutionary directions.
Arguably, the most impressive sky island on the continent can be found on the southern tip of the Baja Peninsula. Here, a small mountain range rises out of the desert to nearly 7,000 feet, just 20 miles inland from the coast. While nearly all of Baja is extremely dry, the highest elevations trap enough moisture to allow a tiny patch of forest to exist. But getting up into this roadless wilderness wouldn't be easy, so the team employed the assistance of some local guides.
We are about to head up to the Sierra de la Laguna, to the top of the very highest part of the Sierra where the pine forest is and where the Juncos are and many other endemics. Now we're in tropical deciduous forest, and we'll climb through oak, and then we'll get up onto the pine oak at around 1,000 meters. It's gonna be a beautiful climb, but it's gonna be like a 7-hour climb. These are local people. They have these are their mules for their work, really, because they have extensive cattle around here. And you know, when someone wants to go up to the Sierra, because there's no roads, then you can hire their mules, and they act as guides. So it's typically people are interested in nature because it's not a very touristy area. Nobody gets out here.
For Junco work, this is the most remote that I've ever been, and every other site that we've worked, we've been able to drive fairly close, at least, to the location. I feel like I'm in pretty good shape, but yeah, it was tough. Uphill for 6.5 hours. Every foot strike, your feet slip a little bit. That's fine the first hour. The last hour, that was killing me. I remember the last hour, just one foot in front of the other, just try and make it up. I mean, I was pretty darn exhausted.
Right when we hit that forest, we started to see Juncos just right along the trail, passing by them. They didn't fly away like I would have expected. You know, and I thought, well, maybe that was just a tame pair that is used to seeing people hiking along the trail. But everywhere throughout the forest up here, the birds are super tame, which is especially surprising since it is such a wilderness, remote kind of area. It's not because they're used to hanging out with people. So this tameness we see here is due to something else besides habituation. We call it like insular tameness, where we see in a lot of different animals. In island populations, they colonize an area and escape a lot of the predators that might have been there, and they become really tame. So something like that may be going on here. In general, at first glance, the Baird's Junco here looks like any of the other yellow-eyeds we might see, but once we got some, you know, in our binoculars in the hand and take a closer look, there's a lot of striking differences. Particularly, one of the things that struck me was how small they were. Also, the whole color appearance is much paler, almost like an overexposed photograph, looks sort of washed out.
Really, the plumage of Baird's Junco conforms to what's called Glodger's rule, which postulates that in drier habitats, birds have lighter, paler colors in the plumage, and in the north, in moister habitats, the darker and more deep colors. So this actually applies to this form of Junco.
This is an endemic form of the American robin that only occurs in this mountain range. And as you can see, similar to some of the other species we're seeing here, the bird is very washed out in color. And on the front, most people think of the red robin. It can have a very red breast. Here is just almost a pale yellow. Most people, when they think of robins, and even the species name indicates it with Turdus migratorius, is that it is a migratory species. However, here in the Sierra de la Laguna, it has become sedentary.
While the Junco crew focused on capturing and processing juncos and recording their songs, a team of Mexican government biologists, led by Ricardo Rodriguez Estrella, was busy collecting data from many other birds found on the mountain. Meanwhile, the cowboys made sure everyone was well fed and watered, and that coffee, vaquero style, was always at the ready. Spending time in the field with international collaborators in such a beautiful and remote setting was a special opportunity for the biologists, not only to collect data, but also to simply make observations and have discussions that would lead to future research questions. Armed with new DNA samples, Mila and McCormick were ready to test the question of just how closely related the different yellow-eyed junco groups might be. Prior findings from the dark-eyed juncos across the US and Canada had revealed that despite striking differences in plumage coloration, these groups were extremely close genetically, and they are able to interbreed in nature. In comparison, plumage differences among the yellow-eyed junco groups are subtle, yet the genetic data revealed that in fact, these groups were highly differentiated genetically. Both the Guatemala junco and the Baja junco proved to be genetically distinct from the rest of the yellow-eyed juncos in mainland Mexico, and the amount of genetic sequence differentiation indicates that they have been on their own evolutionary trajectories since they diverged from a common ancestor approximately 500,000 years ago. The amount of genetic differentiation, the discrete physical differences, and geographic isolation all indicate that both the Baja junco and the Guatemala junco should be considered separate and unique junco species. The discovery that these juncos should be classified as unique species will have important implications for their future protection, and also for the many other endemic plants and animals found in their respective habitats. But there was still a missing piece of the junco's evolutionary history in Mexico. Still to be studied was the most mysterious, isolated, remote, and endangered junco of them all.